Hayao Miyazaki is actually quite erotic, but that sense of eroticism isn't the cheap, shallow kind we usually think of. He absolutely never draws erotic scenes as erotic. At the same time, he doesn't do something silly like refusing to depict them altogether. This girl already understands that she's popular among all the men on the ship. That's exactly why she keeps asking other men for favors, one after another. But she never calls Pazu, right? And why is that? Because he's the man she has fallen for. She doesn't make the man she truly loves work for her. Instead, she relies on those she doesn't care about. That's the real dynamic going on here, and it reveals a lot about her feelings. Friday Roadshow. This summer brings a Studio Ghibli special. Tomorrow, August 30th, at 9 p.m., Castle in the Sky will be broadcast. Following last week's Totoro special, this seminar will also deliver Laputa videos for the next 3 days. These are archived videos, so make sure not to miss any of them. If you haven't subscribed yet, please take this opportunity to do so. It's been a while, so please remember to subscribe. And of course, don't forget to set your recorder for Laputa on either the 30th or the 31st. Good evening, this is the Okada seminar. During this 3-day special, we'll deliver Laputa's analysis in 2 parts, the first half and the second half. On the 3rd day, Saturday, we'll release a bonus episode. In today's and tomorrow's Laputa sessions, we'll analyze the entire film through 6 major themes. In the free portion of today's video, we'll talk about the first theme, Miyazaki's mysterious approach to erotic expression. This video is a rebroadcast of Okada Seminar episode 212, originally aired on January 7, 2018. Now then, let's begin the free video. Good evening, I'm Toshio Okada. This is Nika Live on January 7th. It's already past the New Year's greeting season, so I'll just greet you normally. Today's topic is Hayao Miyazaki. Honestly, there's not much room for idle talk tonight because, to be clear, Laputa simply can't be finished in one session. So this time we'll probably cover the first half and next time the second half. Sorry, I originally thought I could wrap it up in one go, but that was naive of me. It's not something that can be done in just 90 minutes, so I'd like to take my time and discuss it properly. Instead, I want this Laputa analysis to serve as the definitive version. From here on, I'll talk under the assumption that everyone has already seen Laputa, so no need to worrying about spoilers. I've given this new series the title Ghibli Chronicles. We'll start with Castle in the Sky, but as you go deeper into Laputa, you naturally feel the urge to discuss Porco Rosso, and then that connects back to the Castle of Cagliostro. Talking about that means we also need to cover the Castle of Cagliostro from beginning to end, and when we try to re-evaluate Princess Mononoke today, we realize there's no way around it. We have to cover all of Studio Ghibli's works. That includes Takahata's films as well. Starting from Future Boy Conan, you could call this the Warring States era of Ghibli. Basically, it's like the trio of Nobunaga, Hideyoshi, and Ieyasu Takahata, Miyazaki, and Toshio Suzuki. I want to talk about how these 3 have competed and collaborated to create anime, how Studio Ghibli once collapsed, not really destroyed, but dissolved, and how they tried to reunite and start again. That's what I'd like to explore with you tonight. On Friday Roadshow, they're doing 3 consecutive weeks of Ghibli films. Last Friday, January 5th, they aired Kiki's Delivery Service. Next week, January 12th, it'll be Tales from Earthsea. And the week after, on January 19th, they'll show the Castle of Cagliostro. I could follow their lineup, but I prefer to go in my own order, the order that's easiest for me to talk about. It turns out this whole project might take about half a year. Basically, I'd like to cover 1 film per month if possible. So this month I'll talk about Laputa, and hopefully next month I can do Porco Rosso. That's the kind of pace I'm thinking about. So, today's session marks the very first installment. Castle in the Sky was released in 1986. First, let's review the Studio Ghibli timeline. I went ahead and made one myself since it was a hassle to gather. Here's the Ghibli chronology with only the essential points related to today's topic. Of course, there are other details like when the Nausicaa manga started or was paused, but this version only includes what's relevant this time. In April 1978, Future Boy Conan aired, and the following year, December 1979, The Castle of Cagliostro was released. I call this Miyazaki's first golden era. Future Boy Conan ran for 26 episodes on NHK, based on The Incredible Tide. Its success led to Miyazaki's theatrical debut as director with The Castle of Cagliostro. That was Miyazaki's first boom, though only within the industry. However, as you probably know, The Castle of Cagliostro, despite its brilliance, was a box office failure. As a result, Miyazaki was sidelined for about 5 years. Then, in March 1984, Nausicaa of the Valley of the Wind was released. During that time, he continued drawing the Nausicaa manga. In August 1986, Laputa was released. There's a 2-year gap between Nausicaa and Laputa because the staff was once disbanded and later reassembled, which caused a lot of downtime. The reason I list Totoro and Grave of the Fireflies after this is that Laputa was actually the last film produced under Isao Takahata's supervision as producer. So, in a way, Laputa marked the point where Miyazaki and Takahata parted ways. Their ideological differences became clear. It was like a graduation, a natural end to their period of co-producing each other's work. After Laputa, it became obvious that they would no longer produce one another's films. Regarding the making of Laputa, Takahata had various complaints. Later, with Grave of the Fireflies and Only Yesterday, Miyazaki himself would say things like, "Yeah, that's not really my kind of film," so Laputa clearly marked the beginning of their philosophical split. After that came the double feature of My Neighbor Totoro and Grave of the Fireflies, released in 1988. Although Totoro is highly praised now, at the time the double feature didn't perform well at theaters. Nausicaa did decently at the box office, but Laputa didn't make enough to break even. It only recovered its budget later through DVD sales. Totoro and Grave of the Fireflies both failed commercially. It wasn't until 1989's Kiki's Delivery Service that Ghibli started making real profits. Once the money started flowing, they made Only Yesterday in 1991, which ended up a huge financial loss. By that point, Miyazaki and Takahata could no longer work together in the same building, and Porco Rosso in 1992 was made at a separate studio, though still under Ghibli. From that point, they began operating as a separate studio, and that's the major shift to keep in mind. When Future Boy Conan was rebroadcast over the new year, many of you probably remember that it aired at the same time as Farewell to Space Battleship Yamato. Miyazaki had intended Conan to be pure SF and animation within NHK's framework, but it was completely swallowed by Yamato's massive popularity. Aside from a few hardcore fans, almost no one truly appreciated Future Boy Conan. Then came The Castle of Cagliostro, his first theatrical feature into which he poured everything he wanted to express. Unfortunately, it premiered almost simultaneously with the broadcast of Mobile Suit Gundam. As a result, anime magazines except for Animage were filled entirely with Gundam coverage. Although Nausicaa of the Valley of the Wind is now constantly rebroadcast and widely praised, that wasn't the case at the time. In fact, its box office performance was roughly on par with the theatrical Macross movie released at the same time. And if you include related merchandise sales, Macross clearly outsold it. So, for Miyazaki, from the late 70s through the mid-80s, even with Laputa, it was really a difficult era. He managed to create works, but they didn't receive the recognition they deserved. This period is what I call the first anime boom, beginning with Space Battleship Yamato and ending with Macross. Miyazaki didn't ride that wave. I position him as a creator who stood apart from that first anime boom. Of course, that also means very few people could grasp how brilliant he really was. Miyazaki refers to the quartet of Cagliostro, Nausicaa, Laputa, and Totoro as his square. He called it something like a square. In fact, Miyazaki discussed this extensively in a massive interview published in the stylish magazine ***. Most of his own statements in this talk come from that interview. Other related comments are drawn from the Ghibli textbook Castle in the Sky and another useful book called ***Barusu***, written by Kihara, who was in charge of production management for Laputa. That book proved quite valuable. For today's discussion, I based my material mainly on printed sources like these. As I mentioned earlier, in that thick interview collection, Miyazaki refers to Nausicaa, Laputa, and Totoro as forming a square, his own four-sided structure. What he means is that he had already done everything he wanted to do within that shape. He felt he had reached all four corners and there was nothing left. So after that, he actually had no intention of directing any more animated films. In fact, he said he wanted to return to being an animator. He openly said he disliked directing and wanted to go back to being an animator. Miyazaki has mentioned this many times. When Nausicaa was finished, he told everyone, "Please let me return to animation work as an animator." In the anime world, once someone moves from animator to director, almost no one ever goes back. For example, Yoshikazu Yasuhiko started as an animator, then became a character designer, and later a director, but never truly returned to full-time animation work. At most, he occasionally helped with someone else's project. When people around Miyazaki said, "So next is Nausicaa too, right?" he became overwhelmed with emotion and, in front of Toshio Suzuki, shouted out his feelings. He said something like, "I don't want to lose any more friends." What he meant was that when you become a director, the colleagues who once sat beside you at the same desks start to distance themselves, and that's inevitable. Because as a director, he had to tell his colleagues, "This drawing is okay, that one isn't." That was exactly the kind of managerial role we used to resent back in our Toei Doga days. It wasn't the job of a fellow artist. Of course, he understood they were still working on the same project as teammates. But he also understood why animators would feel uncomfortable around a director or supervisor. That's why he said, "I lost so many friends while making Nausicaa. I never want to direct again, don't you understand, Mr. Suzuki?" He pleaded desperately, asking Toshio Suzuki why he couldn't understand, then ran to Isao Takahata saying, "Please let me help you, even now." Takahata was stunned. "You became a director with Future Boy Conan, now you want to go back to being an animator." At the time, Takahata was directing Anne of Green Gables, but he was actually pleased, saying, "If Miyazaki's returning to Anne, that's wonderful," and entrusted him with animation work. Miyazaki insisted, "No, I really am returning to animation. I'll never direct again," but while working at his desk with a pencil in hand, he started glancing at the next seat, saying, "That's not right, fix that," and began correcting others. Before long, he quit working on Anne of Green Gables and ended up directing The Castle of Cagliostro. It all happened that fast. It was like a sketch comedy routine from Tokyo 03. That's the kind of man Miyazaki is. He's emotionally extreme. When he feels he can do something, he'll give it everything, but when he feels defeated, he truly believes he's finished and acts accordingly. His ups and downs are incredibly intense. Ordinary people are called hot-headed. They flare up quickly and cool down just as fast. But when Miyazaki's emotions ignite, it's like nuclear fuel activating an explosive reaction. Anyway, getting back to the topic, those for films were things he had always wanted to make, and when he finished them, he often said to others and to himself that he no longer had anything left he wanted to do. That's how he felt during that period. That's why he was ready to hand Kiki's delivery service over to someone else. That's how completely he felt he'd exhausted his creative drive. Castle in the Sky was one of the works that made him feel he had achieved everything he wanted, and I think he truly meant that. After Totoro, except for taking over Kiki's delivery service midway, it took him for full years until 1992's Porco Rosso to find another project he actually wanted to direct. So when he said he'd already mastered all four corners of his creative square, he genuinely meant it. He had completely used up his inner inspiration. So, what kind of film is Castle in the Sky? To me, it's essentially the Castle of Cagliostro. It's the same structure. A brave princess escapes from villains on her own, and a man rescues her. Whether it's Lupin saving Clarice or Pazu saving Shida, it's the same heroic formula. Then, the villains capture the princess again, take back the treasure, and the hero has to give her up once. In Cagliostro, Lupin gives up when Clarice is drugged. In Laputa, Pazu also momentarily gives up when Shida tells him to forget her, only to get scolded by Dola in that unforgettable scene. In this way, the hero once gives up on the princess. But then, to save her, he gathers his allies, fights alongside them, and in the end discovers a vast ancient city submerged in water. In Cagliostro, it was the ruins of the Roman Empire, and in Laputa, it's the giant city sunk beneath the sea. Structurally, they're astonishingly similar. Why is that? Because the story Miyazaki had always wanted to create was based on Stevenson's Treasure Island, a classic of British children's literature. He loved that genre, and since children's literature originated in Britain, it became the model he constantly returned to, a true timeless standard. The foundation of Treasure Island, its main plot became the framework Miyazaki often applied to his own works. Thinking about who plays the role of the pirate Silver in each story helps you better understand his films. However, at the time, the surrounding boom of Gundam, Space Battleship Yamato, and even his own loop in the third deeply influenced him. He felt a strong sense of opposition toward them. He thought, this isn't what it should be, to him. All those works had elite protagonists, exceptional people with special abilities. Even Gundam, in his view, was no exception. Though we might see Amuro as an ordinary boy, Miyazaki considered Mobile Suit Gundam just another story of a hero flaunting borrowed power. He felt that Amuro, relying on the power of the mecha, was like a fox borrowing the authority of a tiger, a pretender to strength. So Miyazaki wanted to create a film that stood as the opposite, anti-Gundam, anti-Lupin. But later, he admitted he ran into a problem. His concept was to depict a truly ordinary boy, but then realized that such a character couldn't carry the story forward. After all, the enemy is Muska, a brilliant, ruthless intelligence officer who commands the military, and opposing him is Dola, a ferocious pirate matriarch. There's no way a 12 or 13-year-old boy could possibly defeat such foes just because he wants to protect a water source. So, what should he do? That's where Miyazaki's real struggle began. He even said later, I shouldn't have made that claim in the first place, but what really troubled him was when he finished writing his first draft of the script, felt satisfied with it, and showed it to Toshio Suzuki and Isa Takahata. They tore it apart. They told him, this story makes Muska the main character. They said, sure, there's a boy named Pazu, but this isn't a lively adventure film. It's more like the rise and fall of young Muska. In that draft, Muska was the protagonist, a man who grew up hearing stories about Laputa from his parents and vowed, I will restore Laputa's glory. I will rebuild the Laputian civilization. So he kidnaps a girl, tries to win her affection, but she's drawn to a younger boy. Despite all his efforts, he's betrayed by her and loses everything in the end. That's how the story read. The film originally looked like Muska's personal tragedy, his ambition, love, and ultimate downfall rather than the adventure of Pazu and Shida. Miyazaki realized this only after being criticized by his colleagues, and that became the moment of transformation when Castle in the Sky shifted from being Muska's tale to becoming the story of two ordinary children confronting power with courage and heart. They told him, "It's a great movie about Muska, but what are you going to do about that?" He protested, "No, that's not it." It's fascinating to look back now at those early versions, the original Anno's Laputa, so to speak, in its rough conceptual stage. So, it was quite a stretch to make an ordinary boy the main character. In the end, that contradiction remained. The story centers on a royal princess and an unremarkable boy, and ultimately, the two clasp hands and say Bales, the word of destruction, together. He calls it the word of destruction, but in truth, it's a double suicide. The two of them die together to end everything. It's similar to the self-sacrificial ending of Nausicaa of the Valley of the Wind, or like the finale of Farewell to Space Battleship Yamato, the pattern repeats itself. This broadcast is meant to explore why he always ends up there, why it always leads to that conclusion. That's what this Nico Nico Live Laputa analysis aims to unpack. But no, it's not simply the same as Nausicaa or Farewell Yamato, where the story ends with two people prepared for death. It's different. I plan to explain that later in part 4 of a 6-part structure, under the chapter Growth of the Characters and of Hayao Miyazaki himself. As I mentioned earlier, Laputa is a mysterious film. By the way, I said 6 parts, but we haven't even entered part 1 yet. We'll get there soon. It's truly a strange film commercially. As I said, it earned about 780 million yen. Not a total failure, but not a big hit either. However, it spawned an unusually large number of merchandise products. Probably Ghibli's top seller is Totoro, but Laputa comes second in terms of the number of licensed products. After that come Nausicaa and Laputa-related goods, followed by Kiki's Delivery Service and Porco Rosso. Despite modest box office results, Laputa became one of the most beloved Ghibli films. Many fans say it's their favorite Ghibli movie. I think Laputa is probably my favorite as well. Let me explain why. I've identified 6 key points of its appeal. These are what I call Laputa's 6 charms. 1, its mysterious eroticism. 2, its paradoxical critique of civilization. 3, its unexplained characters. 4, its enigmatic industrial revolution. 5, its coming-of-age story for men. And 6, Miyazaki, the human being himself. Through these 6 aspects, I'll discuss Laputa today. In this session, I'll focus mainly on the first 3: mysterious eroticism, paradoxical civilization, and the unexplained characters. Later, we'll move 2 points 4, 5, and 6, how Laputa's industrial revolution feels odd, how the so-called coming-of-age story isn't really about Pazu, and how Miyazaki's own growth shapes the film. So that part of the discussion will be continued next week. Now, let's begin with the first theme of Castle in the Sky, its mysterious eroticism. You might wonder, was there really anything erotic in Laputa? But yes, there actually was. Do you remember this scene? After being released from the tiger moth, Pazu and Shida's glider barely lands on Laputa. The two cheer, hug, and tumble across the ground. That moment, this is the scene in question. In an interview for the stylish magazine *Cut*, the interviewer told Miyazaki, "There's one shot in Laputa I can't agree with." Here's the quote. Actually, I have one complaint about Laputa. When the two protagonists land and realize they've reached Laputa, they're bound together by the rope. They tumble, embrace, and look into each other's eyes. Normally, that's the point where they would kiss. When asked why they didn't, Miyazaki replied, "I think the film expresses enough without showing that." The interviewer asked, "What do you mean by expresses enough?" Miyazaki said, "Well, they're riding the glider." He stopped himself midway, as if remembering he'd been told before, "Don't say things like that aloud." He laughed, implying the meaning was obvious without words. In that animated cut, Shida is holding on to Pazu from behind, trembling slightly as the glider shakes. Miyazaki told the animators, "The boy can feel the girl's chest pressing against him. That's why he stays composed." "You're not drawing with that awareness." When the staff asked, "You mean the source?" He said, "Draw it as if you believe it," and they redrew the scene earnestly. That's how it became such an unexpectedly erotic moment. This whole stretch from their fall to that embrace is filled with a subtle sensuality. The interviewer asked, "So, is Laputa really such an erotic film?" Miyazaki replied, "It's not that I inserted eroticism on purpose. But unless I feel that kind of emotion, I can't draw the night scenes properly. If you just treat it as fashion, it ends up like *Space Battleship Yamato*, he added, mocking other works. That's very Miyazaki. He always criticizes others while explaining his own ideas. In that same interview, the reporter asked again, "Why didn't they kiss in that scene?" Miyazaki answered, "Because I don't need to draw every little thing. It's already expressed within the film." What he meant by "we're doing it" refers to that earlier glider scene, the hang glider above the tiger moth. As they rise, a gust blows, and the glider shakes violently, sending them flying through the air. In that moment, Shida clings tightly to Pazu. Miyazaki felt the animator's drawing of her face as she turned around was too weak. So he summoned the animator and scolded him, "Do you understand? Imagine a girl you like, small chest and all, pressing herself against you." He demanded they redraw it with that feeling in mind. That's the level of emotional reality Miyazaki wanted. He believed that without such honest, embodied awareness, the scene would lose its life. To him, it wasn't about fan service, it was about portraying genuine intimacy between two innocent hearts. Miyazaki told the animator, "If you can feel the girl's breasts pressing against your back, is that really the expression you'd make?" When the animator said, "No," Miyazaki replied, "Then redraw it." When the revised cut came back, he said, "Yes, that's it." He explained, "That's why the boy looks so calm. Feeling a girl rely on him physically gave him the strength to act dependable." He said, "That's what animation is about. That's why, in a sense, Hayao Miyazaki is erotic. But it's not the cheap, shallow eroticism we usually think of. Miyazaki despises anything superficial more than anything else. I should have said this earlier, he absolutely hates simplistic thinking." In one interview, which I've been reading repeatedly this week, there's a phrase he often uses, "That's something Osamu Tezuka would do." It's a trademark line of his. Miyazaki, having always viewed Tezuka as his symbolic rival, would reject any idea if it reminded him too much of Tezuka. If someone suggested, "Why don't you do it this way?" he'd reply, "No, Tezuka would think like that, so I won't." It's not that he disliked Tezuka personally, he just didn't want to imitate him. For example, one of my favorite behind-the-scenes stories involves how he struggled to decide the ending of Nausicaa of the Valley of the Wind In the version we know, Nausicaa stands before the rampaging Omu, gets struck and dies, then is resurrected as the one clad in blue, but Miyazaki had many alternate ideas. One concept had Nausicaa die, and afterward the Omu carry only her body back to the toxic jungle. In that version, she might be revived by the Omu's power, but she would never return to the human world. The Omu, too, would abandon humanity and retreat into the forest. Humans, left behind, would realize too late that their true hope had been Nausicaa herself, and having lost her, they would face despair. When Miyazaki told this to Takahata, Takahata said, "That's fine, isn't it?" But Miyazaki replied, "No, that would turn into Tezuka." He didn't mean that as praise or criticism, it was just instinctive. For him, any first idea that felt Tezuka-like had to be rejected. So he searched for something entirely different and came up with the idea that the Omu were actually larvae. In other words, the Omu we see are not adults, they're giant caterpillars. In his alternate ending, during Nazuke's final scene in the toxic jungle, the Omu begin to molt, their shells crack open, and enormous wings burst out. They ascend into space, leaving Earth behind, not destroying humanity, but abandoning the planet altogether. It would have been like a world without God. The Earth becomes a forsaken Eden, waiting for a divine return that never comes. He said this in the *** interview. When the interviewer responded, "That sounds wonderful," Miyazaki snapped back, "That's exactly why it's no good, it's Tezuka." So the point isn't just his phrase, that's Tezuka. It's that Miyazaki refuses to settle for easy ideas. He generates 50 or 60 concepts, discards 99%, and distills everything down until only one remains, the one that truly feels alive. That perfectionism defines how he creates. That's why Miyazaki eliminates anything done just because it looks cool or will be popular. He despises the easy way out more than anything. So, returning to our main point, he never portrays erotic scenes as erotic. Yet, at the same time, he refuses to avoid them altogether. When he says everything that needs to be done is done within the film, he means if you can't sense it, that's your fault, not mine. He insists, "I've already expressed it properly. I just won't do something foolish like showing it literally." That's Hayao Miyazaki's stance. Now, moving on to Laputa's broader themes. People often say it's about returning to nature or humans can't live apart from the earth, but those are just character lines, not the film's real message. Miyazaki avoids that sort of moral lesson the kind Tezuka Osamu might have written. He questions whether humanity truly needs technology or should return to nature. It's fine as long as technology remains tangible, he says, but once it becomes digital, it's no good. Then he laughs, saying, "That's exactly the kind of thing Tezuka would think, so I won't." In his mind, Tezuka's worldview is his imaginary opponent. That's Miyazaki, someone who always twists expectations a little. And yes, this may sound like a tangent about eroticism, but it's deeply connected. Take, for example, the scene where Pazu catches Shida as she falls from the sky. Look closely. Shida wears a plain outfit and floats gently down. Then she regains her weight, her body becomes solid again. Her chest is drawn very modestly, almost flat, so subtle it could be mistaken for a wrinkle in the fabric. You can barely tell it's there. But that doesn't mean Miyazaki prefers that kind of depiction. In the next scene after Shida tells Pazu to forget about Laputa and sends him away, she stands in despair. She recites the spell her mother taught her. "Save me," who calls for help. Then the levitation stone on her chest begins to glow intensely. As it shines, the light hits her chest, creating a highlight at the center and shadows along the curve, deliberately emphasizing its form. The animators added those details intentionally. He wanted that visual impact, yet he never turned it into an erotic shot. What makes him brilliant is how he avoids depicting it as sexual, yet makes the audience feel slightly guilty for noticing it. It's as if he's saying, if you thought that was erotic, that's on you. That subtle manipulation of emotion is Miyazaki's signature technique. That's exactly what's happening in this scene. He creates tension through restraint, implying intimacy without ever crossing the line. That's how he infuses human warmth into even the most innocent moments. In this scene, Laputa's light returns and Shida's loose, flowing clothes flutter dramatically. That outfit was intentional. The light shines through the billowing fabric, and from certain angles, her upper arms appear faintly visible as if she might not be wearing anything underneath. You can even glimpse the bare line of her shoulder now and then. Viewers might say it's just the light from Laputa, but if that were truly the reason, he wouldn't have dressed her in such soft, translucent sleeves. The point was to show the fluttering motion to make it beautiful and captivating while not letting it feel overtly erotic. He wanted the audience's hearts to race, but in a scene filled with awe and tension. That's why he chose such an intense, almost frightening moment. The film's opening scene does the same thing. The airship is attacked by Dola's gang, and Shida escapes through the window. As the wind roars, her skirt flips up high enough to reveal her thighs. It's a matter of life and death, so it's not sexual, but still, Miyazaki always includes such moments of fleeting exposure. In every Miyazaki film, there's a shot where a girl's skirt flutters just enough to make the audience feel self-conscious. It's never explicit, but it makes the viewer think, did I just see something I shouldn't? That feeling of guilt believing the eroticism lies in your own perception is precisely what Miyazaki aims to evoke. This idea of eroticism as guilt reminds me of Steven Spielberg. In Jaws **, he repeatedly shows people's legs being attacked. He builds fear by showing blood spurting from legs or victims being pulled under shot after shot of legs disappearing into the water. Midway through the film, the police chief Brody's young son is playing by the beach when Jaws appears. Brody runs toward him, terrified. The boy lies unconscious on the sand, being dragged along. The shocking part is that Spielberg doesn't show the legs at all. The camera only shows the boy's face as he's pulled, revealing first his navel, then his thighs, then his feet. That sequence manipulates the audience's expectations. You wonder, is his leg gone? Who is this child? What happened? As Brody's face turns pale, viewers are torn between two emotions, hoping the leg is intact and secretly wanting to see it bitten off. That tiny dark impulse arises inside us all. That guilt is what creates true fear. In horror films, what terrifies us isn't just the danger, it's our own fascination with it. If the threat turns out harmless, we relax. But when it's real, the fear we anticipated becomes guilt for having expected it, and that guilt heightens the terror. Miyazaki uses the same psychological trick, only for eroticism. By strongly insisting, this isn't an erotic scene, he builds a barrier that challenges us to look closer anyway. Our own curiosity sneaking past that barrier is what makes the moment feel charged and alive. He turns our internal conflict into part of the experience. We're the ones who project desire onto the image, and by making us aware of that guilt, he deepens both the realism and the emotional complexity of the scene. That's how Miyazaki crafts subtle erotic tension without ever crossing the line. So, in every case, whether it's this scene or that one Miyazaki always places eroticism within suspenseful moments. It's never shown in peaceful or relaxed settings. And there's something else sharp-eyed viewers may have noticed. From the moment we first meet Shida to the later parts of the story, her chest noticeably grows larger. This isn't just a girl's mature quickly thing, it's only been about 23 days in the story. He draws her that way intentionally because by this stage, Shida has begun to use her femininity consciously. It's not just about eroticism, Miyazaki genuinely portrays the strength and cunning that women possess. Take, for example, the scene aboard the Tiger Moth where Shida is made to work in the kitchen. Do you remember it? Shida starts working in the galley, and Dola's sons, each of whom finds her adorable at first sight, show up one after another, offering to help her with anything. They all end up being bossed around by her as they compete for her attention. Eventually, every one of Dola's sons and even the background crew are working in the kitchen. But here's what's fascinating. Miyazaki never shows Shida's face. Think about how a modern anime would handle that scene. In today's anime, the girl would definitely show her expression smiling awkwardly, saying something like, "Oh, thank you everyone. I guess I'll accept your help." Or she'd be portrayed as an airheaded innocent who doesn't even realize what's happening. That's how most modern anime would play it, but Miyazaki refuses to do either. He avoids both the cute and clumsy and the pure and clueless archetypes because, to him, both are ideas Tezuka would use and therefore too obvious, so he shows only Shida's back. Through that single choice, we understand Shida knows she's admired by every man on the ship. That's why she keeps assigning tasks to all of them but never to Pazu. Why? Because he's the one she actually loves. She makes the men she doesn't care about do her bidding, not the one she cherishes. This insight reveals Miyazaki's honesty about human behavior. When Count Cagliostro grabs Clarice's chin and says, "So, you've learned how to manipulate men." As expected from noble blood, we as viewers think, no, she's not that kind of girl. But perhaps Miyazaki doesn't fully deny that possibility. Maybe even Clarice, deep down, has learned how to use that power. We can't help but wonder how many times she's faced moments like that before contrasting the bold Clarice who steals a car in the opening with the tearful one we see later. It doesn't quite add up, does it? Clarice is a strong girl before Lupin arrives, yet becomes fragile once he's there. And when he leaves, she's ready to abandon her noble life, saying, "Let's live together, I'll become a thief too." In that sense, she's also a shrewd, self-aware woman. I'm not saying she's manipulative, but Miyazaki clearly conveys female complexity by hiding emotion rather than showing it. Dola's craftiness, for instance, is openly admired in the story. When she says of Shida, "That girl will become like me someday," the line carries weight. It's both prophetic and unsettling. So, what kind of girl is Shida, really? Miyazaki doesn't show us directly. For the boys in the audience who long for her, she remains a mystery. He only shows her from behind, teasingly withholding her emotions. That restraint is intentional, almost mischievous. This illustrates Miyazaki's approach to eroticism. He wants to draw the things he loves: skirts fluttering, glimpses of skin, the curve of a breast or thigh, but he refuses to present them as sexy scenes. He despises the shallow "I like this, you like this too, right?" attitude common among modern animators. He deliberately restrains himself. "If I truly love something, I won't show it," he says. Take asterisk the wind rises asterisk even though he's obsessed with the Zero fighter, there isn't a single combat scene. Because if he indulged that love openly, it would turn into a Tezuka-style fantasy. That's Miyazaki's discipline. Through this series, I hope people understand why his staff endure such creative strain yet remain drawn to him. Why, even when they struggle, they still call him Miya-san with awe. There's a kind of magnetic power in him, and that's what I want to explore further today: the mysterious influence Miyazaki holds over those who work with him. Next, let's talk about his contradictory view of civilization. The opening of Asterisk Castle and the Sky Asterisk is simply breathtaking. It's the kind of sequence filmmakers around the world dream of creating, the kind that makes them say, "If I could make an opening like that, I could die happy." We'll analyze that opening shot by shot to see how Laputa was constructed as a world. Interestingly, Mamoru Oshii, in one of his books, harshly criticized Miyazaki's depiction of civilization, calling it inconsistent and superficial. Oshii argued there's no real difference between Pazu's mining town and Laputa's floating city, both are mechanical societies. Miyazaki might claim one is warm and human while the other is cold and detached, but fundamentally they're the same kind of industrial civilization. So, is Oshii right? Miyazaki's film, many say, carries to big misunderstandings. The first is that it's an ecological message movie that humans must live connected to the earth and should never abandon the soil beneath their feet, but that's only a surface reading. That's the first major misunderstanding about Laputa. The second, as Mamoru Oshii argues, is that Miyazaki simply makes films according to his personal whims, criticizing technology one moment, then praising machines the next. Oshii claims this inconsistency makes his work shallow. I believe both views are mistaken. So, where does the real thematic core of Laputa's civilization paradox lie? I'll be discussing that in part 2, the contradictory critique of civilization. All right, that's all for today's free segment. The full version, including exclusive content, is available only in the paid release. In that continuation, we'll explore the second of Laputa's 6 key themes, the contradictory critique of civilization. Many think Laputa is a back-to-nature film opposing science and technology, but it's not just about environmental protection, it's something far more complex. We'll also cover the third theme, characters left unexplained, diving into Dola's younger days and Pazu's backstory as revealed in the Laputa novelization. If you'd like to see the rest, please consider joining the official Okada Library Archive or my YouTube membership or the Dwango below. The Okada Archive even offers a yearly plan at about half the cost of monthly payments. Some people subscribe and cancel month by month, but honestly, if you're doing that, you might as well try the annual plan once it's a better deal. Think of it as an experiment. I think you'll find it worth it. For details, please check the video description, there's a link there. Thank you for watching, and I'll see you again in the next video. See you next time.